Des Plaines Avenue. It's 33 minutes from 390 to downtown. That's traffic. I'm Jim Telemonte on AM 560 The Answer.
More of Chicago's Morning Answer comes your way next. Now your official Chicagoland weather forecast. It's going to be a pretty nice one today. Pleasant intervals of clouds and sunshine. A high temperature, very comfortable 74 degrees. Clear sky tonight will dip down to 57. Then tomorrow, mostly sunny, pleasant again. High temperature hitting 78 degrees. It's currently 63 degrees. Your next news update coming up in 30 minutes. For continuous coverage of the latest news, traffic, and weather, go to 560theanswer.com. I'm Elisa Z. Now more of Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560, The Answer.
This hourly segment is brought to you by On Target Radio. From firearms and Second Amendment rights to personal freedoms and government intrusions. Listen here Sunday nights at 9.
If you're looking for the latest news, insight into what it means, and the sharpest opinion, there's only one station in Chicago where you can turn, and it's this one. We're AM 560, The Answer.
Top of the morning, Dan and Amy, and President Trump none too happy with the state of Nevada. The Nevada legislature passing a bill to send mail-in ballots to all voters ahead of the November 3rd presidential election, and Trump vowing legal action over that plan. It's an illegal late-night coup. Nevada's clubhouse governor made it impossible for Republicans to win the state. Post office could never handle the traffic of mail-in votes without preparation. Using COVID to steal the state, see you in court, is what Trump tweeted. That tweet didn't get near as much attention as his tweet about the election being delayed until people can properly, securely, and safely vote, ? But perhaps it deserves equal consideration as Trump continues to raise the profile on concerns about a vote-by-mail national election, state by state. For more on the topic, we're pleased to be joined by Hans Von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow for the Heritage Foundation, former FEC Commissioner, and former DOJ Attorney as well. Hans, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Dan, Amy, it's nice to talk to you.
So what about Trump's response to what the Nevada state legislature did?
Well, I don't quite understand why Nevada would do that when, remember, they did that during their primary, right? And there were all kinds of newspaper reports about how their voter list is so bad that when they mailed out ballots to every registered voter, they found ballots piled up all over the state. They found them piled up in apartment buildings, general lobbies. They found them. They found some in trash cans. In essence, all these ballots have been mailed out to people who no longer live where they're supposed to live because they're no longer in the state. And so you had all these extra ballots floating around all over the place. And that, of course, provides the opportunity for potential fraud.
And, it's worth noting, I suppose, that they're still trying to figure out who won that congressional primary in New York a month after that election, in addition to the experience in Paterson, New Jersey, where a fifth of the mail-in votes were spoiled, were kicked out, essentially, because they couldn't be verified. And one could look at that and say, well, look at that. That's a way that there are checks and balances in the process. There are redundancies. Ballots that cannot be verified are being kicked out, as they were in Paterson, New Jersey. And so it shows that you can absolutely do a mail-in only election. It may take a little bit more time, but it can be done and still protect the integrity of the process. How do you respond?
Well, yeah, the way I would look at that is if signatures aren't matching, that's an indication that somebody else got a hold of that absentee ballot, forged a signature, and sent it in. That's much tougher to do in a polling place. Second, apparently 1 in 5 ballots in the New York primary was rejected. And not just because signatures didn't match, but often because the real voter didn't put all the information they're technically required to put on the form when they sent it back. That means that you have a potential disenfranchisement rate of almost 20%. If 20% of people showing up at polling places were were being turned around the door and saying, you can't vote, your ballot's not going to count, people would, rightly so, be extremely angry about that.
You know, Hans, I saw somebody tweet that if you won a lottery ticket worth millions, would you mail it in or would you feel safer if you hand delivered it? Is that a good point? Because it's so true. And I don't trust the mail anyway. I'm still waiting from a check from 1987 from someone. I mean, I just don't trust the Postal Service. They're not election judges.
Well, no, you're exactly right. And listen, the Inspector General of the Postal Service just recently issued a report on the Wisconsin primary. You recall that was April 7th. And according to the IG report, there were at least 3,500 ballots that were never delivered by the U.S. Postal Service to voters. There were also hundreds of ballots that when voters put them in the mail to mail back to election officials, guess what the Postal Service forgot to do? They didn't postmark them. And that meant that when they got to election officials didn't count them because they couldn't prove that the ballots had been put in the mail by the end of election day. So you're talking about literally thousands of people in Wisconsin who didn't get to vote, again, because of mistakes and errors made by the U.S. Postal Service.
We also have posts on social media, including this woman from Illinois. So happy to receive my third vote-by-mail official election material in the mail with the name of the persons that lived here over 5 years ago, 3 years ago, and a year ago, right before I moved in. I had a friend who he's moved to Texas. His son lives in Texas now. His son received two applications for vote-by-mail ballots as well. So there's that as well in terms of, so down the post office, there's a problem with respect to voter lists and the cleaning of those lists, the integrity of those lists, and thus the administration of the election. We seem to have a problem in many states as well.
Yeah, no, you're absolutely right. And look, I think the average person out there ought to be insisting to local officials, look, I want to be able to vote in person where I know I can see myself putting my ballot in the ballot box rather than relying on the mail service. And by the way, as long as they run the polling places with all the health safety protocols in place we're all seeing when we go to the grocery store and the pharmacy, it can be done safely. In fact, the CDC, Centers for Disease Control, just issued a report on the Wisconsin primary again, in which they say that, in essence, following those safety protocols in the polling places, there was no spike in COVID-19 infections in Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm. I want to vote, Hans, but I also want to live.
I can't teach from the grave.
Right.
All these same
Although you
signs
can vote from the grave.
Oh, that's right.
At least in Cook County. Yes. I know that's still an option. Right. So what can the president do with elections that are administered at the state and local level, or the Republican Party, or Republican parties around the country, or Democrat parties actually too? Because it's interesting. We talked about this the other day, and there's a group that was that's particularly focused on turning out young people to vote, getting them more engaged in the civic process. And they say, we're a little bit worried about youth participation in this election because they're just not familiar with the application process. I mean, this, it's something us old people forget, Hans. They're not familiar with where you go to get stamps. They don't use stamps. So it's like, it could be hurdles that are being created for young people that will prevent their participation. And since they're disproportionately left, you would think the Democrats would be concerned about that. So it doesn't have to be a partisan thing. It's just Democrats are making it one.
Well, they are. And in fact, it was just 8 years ago that the New York Times, which is, very liberal, listen, they wrote actually a very good, very active article in 2012 about all of the problems with voting by mail. And they pointed out that the more people vote by mail, the greater ballots are vulnerable to fraud, the more problems you have because of misdelivery by the Postal Service. And they pointed out that the rejection rate for ballots by mail is much higher than that for people voting in polling places. So back then, they they all agreed it was a bad idea. It's just recently they're saying, oh, no, there's no problems with this. We should be doing this.
And so what can be done? I mean, Trump said, see you in court to Nevada via Twitter, but you're going to litigate this state by state? Is that the only option for the president?
But that's already going on. There's been, if you can believe this,
Judicial Watch,
150 lawsuits filed all over the country mostly by the left, actually, trying to force states to go to all-mail elections. So this battle is being fought in almost every state right now as we speak.
Mm-hmm. And the president would be shrewd to weigh in as well. I mean, it doesn't mean that the RNC or the Trump campaign can't also file.
Well, look what he did with that tweet last week, where he questioned should the election be delayed. He wasn't saying that he wants to delay the election. What he was doing was, because you know how the media just concentrates on his tweets.
Yes.
What happened last week after that tweet? There were discussions by almost every media organization about absentee and mail-in balloting and whether it can be safely done or not. He clearly spurred that because of his tweet.
He is Hans Von Spakovsky, Senior Legal Fellow for the Heritage Foundation, former FEC Commissioner and former DOJ Attorney as well. Hans, thanks for joining us as always. Appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Take care.
And he joined us on our turnkey.pro answer line.
The stories you need to know to start your day. This is Chicago's Morning Answer on AM 560. The Answer.
In family law, the gold standard is membership in the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers. Only 150 Illinois attorneys have earned the right to be called Academy Fellows. It's a badge of their respect in the eyes of their colleagues and especially the family court judges before whom they appear. The Academy's Illinois chapter includes the most skilled negotiators and litigators. Their experience in all facets of family law, from annulment and divorce to child custody and property valuations, is unmatched. Each has at least 10 years' experience in the field and